Hey, this is Mike. Welcome to Atomics on a Friday. Thank you for checking out this demo. If you would like, subscribe and like to get more content in the future. Enjoy. Any questions or anything, Paul, or any thoughts, words, phrases?
I tried to deep dive the app command binary and understand the images that it loads and the functions that it uses in order to register the DLLs. In particular, the PowerShell command is built on .NET, so there's actually a .NET command. It's GAC install, and there's another one that is built in the .NET framework that supports that. App command is slightly different. I didn't actually get to finish out and track it. It actually got really convoluted, and I got lost, and the symbols didn't make any sense either. So there's probably some smart REs out there that can probably help track down explicitly where those APIs are, because another way to think about it is, while we can target app command, what if we identify the specific API call that can be leveraged, and then in particular a custom binary is executed, or that API is called directly to do it versus using that. So we're taking a step deeper as opposed to just trying to key off of a specific process. So hopefully track that down a little bit sooner, because I think it's going to be interesting, especially if we continue to see IIS being abused with these types of DLLs and modules.
Yep. For sure. Thanks, man.
Yeah,
I wrote notes, and I guess we could share these somewhere because somebody.
Yeah, well, we'll put them in the GitHub.
Yeah, the GitHub.
The GitHub.
So yeah, I kind of briefly walk through the Microsoft blog here. This is from the Defender research team. This is the July blog. It's again, these are very covert, hard to find. They hide deep. This stuff is like, it's mind blowing that it's talked about like this, right? It's almost like the new APT, minus you don't use the word APT. Targeting Exchange servers, and look at the names, right? Like app web logo image handler, things like that. Like, it's amazing because every time I've seen one of these, they always look pretty non-discrete. It's not obvious. This isn't like IIS backdoor and things like that. And then this one I remember does break down how modules look and work. How do you create them?
Yeah, go back up just a little bit.
Oh, yep.
Right. So that's where it starts with the bold.
Got it.
So that talks about the PowerShell API that it's going to use, and then actually gives the explicit PowerShell command. So if you wanted to, again, submit another atomic, you could use that PowerShell that they put in the screenshot, test it out, just make sure there's some cleanup commands in there. But that's another interesting use case. And there's some variances that you could also do on there if you're interested in kind of playing around with it or digging in deeper. But again,
yep, that's a solid one. Yeah, I might have to get a play with that one. Yeah, and so they talk about how this. I'm pretty sure this one is all about an adversary. So they're saying like this particular adversary used GAC-util or GAC, plus they used app command to install their module. And again, this is all very similar to what our atomic tests look like. This is the GAC-util version with the -I, which we have not yet shipped a atomic on for GAC-util. Remember I mentioned two different config files. Here's your web config and then your application host config. And I'll show that in a second. And then once it's registered, you can definitely see it in the IIS modules within the manager. But yeah, I guess this one was through proxy shell. And so yeah, they go through talking about cred access and how they did all their other stuff. That's a great blog to start with. The second one, this is the one that was in response to the ICE Apple. This is from Mystic and December 12th. This one goes into, here's the ICE Apple report, all the different pieces, like how the actual, the modules kind of speak and talk, event triggers. But then it gets into the good stuff. They talk, remember this one's all specifically on hunting and or detecting. So they do break down like W3WP, all the different child procs, what to look for. This log, which I believe we looked into, right, Paul, they had a specific ETW log that they called out in here.
Yeah, so ETW, event tracing for Windows. There are two for .NET. It's .NET and then .NET Rundown. So if you run logman query and then pipe into select string with a pattern of .NET, it'll tell you specifically the two. They're listed. And they'll kind of provide some of this, again, for assembly loading, some interesting data points. And I think it's a few EDRs are actually leveraging that particular ETW provider for some of their ETW analysis, or excuse me, .NET analysis from the ETW provider.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember we looked at this. I thought they called it out, but maybe I'm skipping through it too quick here.
I can run that.
Here's our advanced IIS logging that we mentioned. This is the piece I started shipping, and this is what it looks like, in the actual event log. They do tell you, like I mentioned, the module name here, and then like which app it was applied to. And a little side note there. Again, this is what it looks like. Let me skip down. So then they talk about, listing out your commands or listing out your modules. Very obviously everything we talked about here. Something I was interested in too. We think you were just mentioning this too, Paul, about event ID 50. Yeah, event ID 50 just literally is like, hey, your config was updated. Other than that, I can't tell you much more. It's like, okay, all right, chug along.
Depending on activity and how often configurations are updated within your application pools, that could be viable to at least give you the starting point. And again, if adversary changes tactics or techniques, then certain activity that you would rely on in some of these other event logs may not be there, but at least can give you a starting point. But again, it's a very generalized, it's truly the quote unquote informational type log that Microsoft likes to spit out sometimes.
Yep. This is the W3WP loading a malicious DLL. And obviously if you have like an EDR and or like what you see in this screenshot from their tool here, you'll see it comes out of www.root bin proxy shell DLL. So it would be a module installed in a non-standard path. And if you were inventorying, you would see, DLLs, on your inventory and in your module loads as well, coming from two different places. So definitely very powerful to go after that route. It's just could be, certain EDRs collect modules. Some of them reduce the amount that they do collect, things like that. So you just have to kind of play your game. Was this here's the ETW stuff. We just happened to jump the blog. These are the event IDs and everything like that. I think we got this data, didn't we? We played with
rundown.
It. Yeah.
So the first one is Microsoft Windows .NET runtime, and then the second one, the one that they're leveraging, is the .NET runtime rundown. So there's the two for your .NET ETW providers.
Yes. Anyway, I'll probably stop there because that's about it, I guess. But it just talks about process creation off of W3WP, and then module installation with app command and gacutil, which, we failed to throw that one.
The interesting piece is if you look in the image above, actually two above, one more above. Yeah, the module IL path. So when an assembly is reflectively loaded into an already running process, you can see the difference that in the case of Sharpound, there's no path associated. And in the case of a legitimate one, it's showing that it's loading off of disk, right? And then same with the assembly flags that they're specified for 0. So those are some interesting points to keep out for, depending if your EDR or methods of log collection can provide that. If you're just ingesting pure ETW logs, which you can, highly recommend. In specific cases, those are good points to key off of.
Yes. Would love to get those. I'm not going to go crazy on the Ice Apple one, but
it's a big one.
It's a worthy read. I think you said it was 22 pages, and I think the highlight of it is that they do break down each of the modules that this adversary used, which is really cool to see because again, it's like a framework, and their modules were literally called App Web IC. Like, if you're not inventorying and you see app webs, maybe it looks completely normal, right? Like that's the hardest part here is digging into all of these. But it was
really good write-up and some really interesting components from each one and kind of the the updates that were made and applied and kind of throughout the evolution of this is really fascinating. So definitely a good read and a lot of key points in that credential dumper aspect.
Yeah,
you're looking into as a separate aspect, which is really interesting as well from that technique standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, the sidebar here, and I guess this could have been our mini AF today, was digging into the credential dumper piece here. It's not your normal Mimikatz XE, right? This is using syskey, bootkey type stuff, and I am really interested in generating an atomic for this. There's a couple PowerShell scripts out there that will do this for us, but I really want to find a way to do it kind of with an atomic outside of maybe just bringing in that PowerShell script, but I probably just will. Either way, this is a really interesting one. Yeah, do both and do live. Let me see, go back to my notes. All right, so I'm pretty sure I already have this log enabled, I think, but I'm gonna run it for funsies because boom, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't even tell you. Let's look at the IIS modules in IIS, and to get there is literally go into your IIS manager and then go to modules, and then poof, they're all here. Like I mentioned in the other screenshot, you'll see your native and managed ones in here. And most all of them, will have, most of them, like your native ones will have directory paths that they're in and things like that. Here's our backdoor one, things like that. It's all fun and games. And you can actually remove these live. Like you're just like, oh, get this out of my server. Like just kick that stuff out. And I think you can add your managed modules here, which remember I mentioned it's a little bit different than just having a native module on disk. And you're like, well, just go find my DLL and drop it in here. And yes, you can. So those are pretty simple. Here's one right here.
And
boom.
I didn't actually validate this, but when you do remove the module, chances are you're probably going to have to restart the app pool because you need to kill the IIS process workers in order to basically dump out if that DLL is already loaded, right? If that module is loaded, it's not just going to yeet it out of memory because it's already loaded. So you probably have to restart the app pool. I don't know. I don't know enough about IIS web servers.
Okay, so I just removed it. I removed all my Metasploit ones. This is the application host config. I'm going to refresh. And yeah, it looks like they might still be here. So I wonder where it removed it. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I didn't dig into that piece enough to spell it correctly first. This is it. Okay. But yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
We'll find it later.
And then, yeah. Okay. And so back to our demo. Let's just list the modules. It is a pain to keep typing the path to app command. So if you are, I'm telling you, it's sometimes just faster to literally just put it in a variable.
I wound up when I was testing just CDing right into the iNet serve and just leaving the terminal running there.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
Add it to your environment variables or your environment paths and just reload your terminals.
Yeah, you should. That's probably the better option.
You'd think when you install it, they do it for you because, like, as a server manager, like, I don't want to have to remember like where these paths exist. I should just be able to run the command and call it a day.
I know. Yeah, I know. So I just installed our Atomics on a Friday module. Boom, it's down here now. And if you crack open our app config, you'll see it there too. Peekaboo.
I think an interesting point here is that, as you can see, when you add these modules, they get added last to the list. So if you're looking, you're like, hey, this thing's first, like this has got to be like, it's not newest first, it's oldest first. The things that are potentially default are going to be at the top. And the interesting things are probably going to be closer towards the bottom of the list, depending on, again, activity. But without a big pool sample, it's hard to just say like these ones are the default, but baselining is important in these cases.
And how, I think that's part of your hunt of like how often is app command running to install new modules, and you may find it might not be ever in your environment, especially on actual web servers in your org, you may not see them. The other thing I had an idea on was I started writing a very basic PowerShell script that got the hash of your application host file or your web config, grab the hash, and then compare the hash to, or just kind of like run it daily, like, and compare it, like, yep, hasn't been modified, you know, and just kind of like constantly checks. You could run it daily kind of thing. Like,
Like a
oh, wait a
file
minute.
integrity monitor.
Exactly. Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a neat
You could
perspective.
toss, because what in my brain, I was thinking, I was like, if I was an adversary, what if I just modify this and either maybe randomly reboot the server or wait until it reboots or restarts or something, loads it up, but nobody saw like the app command run, right? Like it's just the inverse of it all.
Yeah.
That's
I
how
didn't even think about that. It's a really good perspective.
Yeah,
How
probably worth
often?
the
'Cause that
test.
file shouldn't probably change.
It shouldn't.
Would be my guess.
It shouldn't change until someone, you know, adds a new module or something. I have no idea. Yeah, next bit. So that was the whole app command installing a module. I'm just going to flip to the PowerShell version of it. And so similar output. Obviously, this was more of like your IIS looking kind of method, but your PowerShell one with the get web global module, get your name and your image. So the directory path or the path to it, which you can see all of our evilly looking ones are down here. And with that, I already unregistered our Atomics on a Friday module. So I'll re-register it again. There it is. And then do another get, and then boom, it's alive. And if you come back in here and refresh, I'm sure we'll
Now,
see.
the DLL that's part of the Atomics, what behavior happens if that DLL gets loaded or when you execute it?
Nothing. It's actually just a default DLL that comes with inetserv. It's like just a simple one. I figured I chose it because if you're running IIS, I wanted to make sure that it was everybody could use it kind of thing.
37 calculators start popping off.
Yeah.
Across the fleet.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You always have to watch for your calcs on IIS web servers. That's probably the more important topic here. Otherwise, remove it. Same thing. And everybody is obviously here for actually kicking off the Atomics, right? Like we wouldn't
should
be
actually
here
maybe run
that.
Atomics.
Maybe we should do an Atomic. Just trying to make it easy here. I'm gonna watch my copy paste skills.
Copy paste live.
And yeah, this thing always gets hung up. Oh, never mind.
It did.
It worked faster. My copy paste. So remember our 1505s, 004s are the app command ones and the set global in PowerShell. So you just run that. It'll do its magic, and then cleanup will do its cleanup. And then let's just run test number 2, which is our PowerShell version. And so it's adding that new module, and then your cleanup will run again. And I think this is the one that hangs a little bit for some reason, but it worked a second ago. And then our 1562 is going to disable all the logging. Yeah, come on. Until then,
maybe
fill the void.
Start playing music.
Yes, right. We're just gonna hang out until this finishes. Oh, there it goes. Okay, and so then going to our HTTP, disabling the logs for HTTP. Same thing. We're just going to use app command, set that config, and we'll just run that. It's all done. It's like, thank you so much. Same thing in PowerShell this time. It's like, yay. And then don't forget your bonus points. For those of you out there following along at home, get that PR in. Get the shirt.
And remember, it's easy to, when using the invoke framework, to use a hash table to create custom parameters. So when you see in kind of Mike's example at the top where you see the red, you can override those default ones. So if you want to try something different, kind of mimic something similar to the reports, change it up, make sure that you're not just keying off of specific file names, but kind of detect some of the behavioral aspects of it. It's an important thing to remember as well. I think a lot of people potentially forget is that you can absolutely change the defaults. You don't have to modify the YAMLs. You can just create a variable as a hash table and then pass it as a parameter, which is input args or custom input args.
It's dash prompt for input args. I have it on the screen.
Yep.
So yeah. Well, yes, I know what you mean. Inside the YAML, you would 1505. Input arguments. And then in this particular case, like Paul was saying, I have two of them in here, the actual module, IIS module name, and then the DLL path. So if you're like, I want to be Leet Haxor, or load my own DLL because Mike's idea was horrible.
I want calculator pop, so you build your own IIS module that pops calculator.
Yeah.
You can absolutely do that.
Goes and does that for you.
So,
it's very
flexible.
That's
potentially forgotten about is that you can A, do it on the fly as a PowerShell variable and pass it, or B, prompt just like you showed.
Yep. Yeah, this is awesome, especially when you're working with atomics that have input args. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Pro tip,
I don't know
if you can use input args in your atomic test, put them in there.
Yes, do that on your set item property right there. That'll be money. You get 2 shirts. That's what we'll tell Donahue to do, is that the person gets 2.
That's right. The more input args you put, the more shirts you'll get.
Yes.
Brian's probably watching us and losing.
I know. He's like, no. He's going to be negatively responding on the chat.
Waiting for my DMs to come flying in now.
Yes. That's awesome. So on the detection side, I'll share some screenshots. I'll share what we did at Splunk as far as the content that I shipped. This is on the Research Splunk site under the IIS Components page. I shipped a bunch of things covering, new modules being added with app command, new modules being added with the, set web global module, things like that. Looking for, HTTP logging being disabled either via app command or PowerShell. Overall, I feel like there's quite a bit of content to be written. I also went after a script block logging from PowerShell, looking for, the usage of like web global module, the commandlets being ran. I think that's very powerful to go after. And then also, we mentioned using that inside that inputs.conf to grab everything from listing out the modules and grabbing it and splunking it. So I'm just going to flip over to Splunk here. This is, I'm just using 4688 from Windows here, which is just like that process command line stuff. So it's just very simple, just look for app command using install or module and just listing out the command line. So you can see, let's see if it pulled in the new stuff. My server's kind of laggy. So you can see install modules, and it's just doing, that exact thing we were just testing. And then, so that's just app command. And again, many orgs may not ever use it. Obviously, I'm in a kind of a test environment, so there's not much. I don't have like 500 servers hanging out, but this may never be used, right? Like it's one of those things to just go and find and see what's happening in your environment. Check out that app command. And this is the event code 29 that I just could not get to work. So it's just done. I got a screenshot. This is the PowerShell inputs from that comp file. It's literally listing out all those modules. The cool thing, right, is you can say, not in certain paths like inet serve and things like that. Or for your organization, you may have an app that has to use a module from a weird path. You could just exclude it, kind of filter that out. But typically, as you can see, most everything being loaded is from inet serve and the .NET framework. All the evils. I don't know where this one came from. And
Spelled wrong
then
too.
I know it's everywhere. Oh, so didn't even talk about this. So when I first started geeking out on IIS modules, I was like, does it just load any DLL? Because I was curious, right? And I knew it didn't based on some blogs or based on the one Microsoft blog, but I was like, why not give it a try, right? So I just compiled a simple Metasploit DLL. That's why you see it everywhere in my data. I actually found that there's an event code, 2282, where it's like, yo, this DLL is struggling to load into IIS and you should probably fix this. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And so it dumps this 2282 out, telling you you have a failing module. So this might be powerful to just go and look for in your environment. It's in the application one event log. If you're not logging it somewhere, maybe it's local, but like you could at least go and see like, hey, are any modules on my 60 fleet IIS environment failing to load? And that's something probably worthy to just hunt and look into. Maybe an adversary had attempted to load something and it failed. This is a cool tip off. And you can see it's still running 645,000.
Oh, your slides out or your screenshots out of date. That one's only got 69,000 attempted or failed attempts to
Oh my
load.
gosh. Yeah, I should update
That's
that.
phenomenal.
That's a crap ton. It's just like constant. Yeah, that's amazing. And this is the 4104 script block. This is looking for the get web config property or set item property. All you elite atomic hacksaws out there trying to bypass or evade my logic. It does attempt to identify someone disabling HTTP logging, watching you. Ship that PR. And then I don't think this is pulling in yet either, but this is just a yet again. Oh, there it is. Looking for a new web global module being ran in my environment. So if you're collecting script block, or if you haven't seen script block logging from PowerShell 4104, this is quite the money for any org or for any, SIM vendor or anything like that. 4104 is quite magical for PowerShell. And yeah, see all our new modules.
And if your EDR doesn't collect script load data, you should go yell at them and